Due to a space accident, the rookie miner had to make an emergency landing on an unfamiliar planet, but this planet hides alien spiders. There are also several other terrifying monsters watching covetously. The rookie only has a not-so-smart AI assistant. How should he escape this planet surrounded by monsters? In the depths of the vast universe, a mining ship was sailing at a constant speed along a preset route, but for some unknown reason, the mining ship suddenly strayed into an asteroid belt. Leon, the ship's artificial intelligence, quickly detected the crisis but was powerless to reverse the situation. It could only urgently wake up the sleeping miners. Andy was a rookie miner on the mining ship. Before he could sort out the situation after regaining consciousness, a robotic arm sprayed nanomaterials onto Andy's body. Immediately after that, it began to install the important components of the spacesuit. But as soon as the installation was completed, Leon controlled the escape pod to separate from the mining ship. Looking at the scene in front of him, Andy understood what was happening. It was at this moment that Leon began to put the helmet on Andy. The assembly of the lightweight spacesuit was completed in a short while. It then controlled the escape pod to make an emergency landing on the nearest planet. However, the escape pod was ejected at too high a speed. When passing through the planet's atmosphere, intense friction generated a high temperature of 1,600 degrees Celsius. The escape pods around Andy exploded one after another. He hurriedly told Leon to open the speed brakes, and only then narrowly escaped with his life. At this moment, the speed brakes suddenly broke. The escape pod lost balance instantly, and crashed awkwardly onto the planet's surface. Andy was a rookie to begin with, and after encountering such a major accident, he didn't know what to do for a moment. Leon detected that his heart rate was too high and wanted to defibrillate him. Andy hurriedly stopped it and temporarily shut down the AI. After calming down, he turned on the communication and called for help on the public channel, but the channel remained completely silent. Just then, the system suddenly gave an alarm. It detected that a ground crack had formed under the escape pod, and they had to escape quickly. Andy didn't have time to think carefully and used a tool to break the glass. However, just as he was about to climb out of the escape pod, the pod suddenly tipped over, and the broken glass cut through his spacesuit. The system alarmed again. The planet's atmospheric composition was unfit for human survival, with carbon dioxide concentration as high as 97% and oxygen content only 2%.
42% oxygen remaining.
Before he could even catch his breath, an electrical fire suddenly broke out in the escape pod. Andy fled in a hurry, but as soon as he stood steady, he saw the mining ship crashing down. The next second, a shockwave threw him into the air. Andy knew that he could only rely on himself to survive, so he asked Leon to pull up the mining ship's navigation log. The log showed that the mining ship had traveled 2.48 trillion kilometers after leaving Earth, and only crashed on this never-before-explored planet. Just now, after straying into the asteroid belt by mistake, Andy felt even more desperate upon hearing this. It was at this moment that a faint light suddenly lit up at the site of the mining ship's crash. Andy had no better plan, so he decided to go check it out, just in case. As he walked, he turned on the public channel again to call for his companions, but only the static of electric current responded to him. A few minutes later, Andy saw the burning wreckage of an escape pod. He asked Leon to scan the area and found another relatively intact escape pod. Andy hurried over to check, but there were no signs of survivors inside. Fortunately, there was an unused oxygen tank. Andy pulled hard, only to drag out the bodies of other miners. He stepped back in fear. After calming down, he checked the oxygen tank, only to find that the tank was cracked, and all the oxygen inside had already leaked out. Andy had to suppress his emotions and keep moving, but he didn't notice several claw marks on the hard outer shell of the escape pod. Obviously, there were terrifying creatures on this planet. After a difficult journey, Andy reached the source of the light. To his surprise, he found Dwayne, who was adjusting the signal equipment. When Dwayne saw Andy approaching, a look of joy also appeared on his face. Unlike Andy's panic, Dwayne, as the communicator on the mining ship, was already accustomed to sudden emergencies. He told Andy that when the miners had been in cryogenic hibernation for 3 years and 4 months, the mining company decided to take a shortcut to save fuel, which led them into the asteroid belt and caused this disaster. Now they had crashed on a planet that had never been explored. Although the communication equipment could contact the headquarters, the signal would take 6 months to transmit due to the extreme distance from Earth. The earliest rescue could arrive here would be in a year and a half. In other words, the two of them would have to survive on this uninhabitable planet for 2 years. Andy was completely desperate upon hearing this, but Dwayne remained calm. He saw the mining ship crash not far away. If the living cabin inside the ship wasn't damaged, the large amount of oxygen and food inside would allow them to easily survive for 2 years. Seeing that Andy was still pessimistic,
"You'll be fine."
urged by Dwayne, Andy quickly plugged in the power cord. It was at this moment that a dark figure suddenly darted past him from behind. When Andy turned around, Dwayne had disappeared without a trace. He searched around but couldn't find any sign of Dwayne. Just then, Leon reminded Andy that only 36% of the oxygen remained. Andy had to send a distress signal without authorization, grab Dwayne's gun, and head toward the mining ship's crash site according to the plan they had just agreed on. He asked Leon to plan the shortest route, but after walking for a long time, he realized that the navigation had led him to the edge of a cliff. It turned out that Leon's system was malfunctioning, and needed to be sent back to the company for repairs. Andy's emotions collapsed. But just as he was venting his helpless anger, a cry for help came over the public channel. This gave Andy a glimmer of hope. He told the other person to keep the call connected, and quickly climbed up a nearby mountain. After some effort, he finally stabilized the signal. The person speaking was named Now, and she was the communication supervisor of the mining ship. Her leg was stuck, and she was trapped in the escape pod, needing Andy's help. After saying this, Now sent her location to him. Andy asked Leon to calculate the optimal route, but Leon said that Andy was too far from Now, and the terrain along the way was unstable with extremely low visibility, so it didn't recommend Andy to go for the rescue. Now could hear Andy's hesitation, but she still suggested he come. She had plenty of oxygen here, and if Andy didn't come, he would likely die from oxygen deprivation in the end. Andy's mind raced. Reaching Now's location would consume at least 30% of his oxygen, which was risky. It would be better to rush to the mining ship's crash site to replenish oxygen than to risk rescuing someone. But who could guarantee that the oxygen tanks at the crash site were intact? Thinking of this, Andy still decided to take the risk to save Now. He changed direction and headed toward her location. The two talked a lot on the way, and their understanding of each other deepened significantly. As night fell, Andy had no good lighting equipment. Only his helmet light could illuminate a small area ahead. He continued chatting with Now to pass the time, but when he walked under a hillside, several pieces of gravel suddenly rolled down from the mountain. Along with it came the sound of a creature passing by, as if something was hiding in the mountain. Andy looked around vigilantly but found no abnormalities. He assumed the stones had been blown down by the wind. He suppressed his doubts and continued walking, but soon after, he found many small holes scattered on the ground. He felt more and more that something was wrong, and summoned the courage to walk in the direction where the holes extended. Soon, he found a huge cave entrance, which was covered with a sticky substance similar to spider webs. Andy exclaimed, "Could there be giant spiders on this planet?" Now was very panicked upon hearing this. To calm her down, Andy had to suppress his own fear to comfort her. But before he walked far, there were more and more spider webs around him, and a strong sense of unease suddenly welled up in his heart. He always felt that something was following him in the dark, and his pace unconsciously quickened. Just then, the system prompt suddenly sounded. Over the past 5 minutes, the surrounding temperature had dropped sharply by 5.6 degrees Celsius. This would accelerate the rate of oxygen consumption. And now Andy only had 27% oxygen left, so continuing forward wasn't recommended. But now that things had come this far, Andy couldn't give up easily. He turned off the prompt. Suddenly, a low roar sounded in the dark, and Andy observed his surroundings cautiously. The next second, a dark figure darted past at an extremely fast speed. Andy quickly squatted down and turned off his helmet light. It was at this moment that Now told Andy that she had detected many minor ID trackers approaching him rapidly. However, Andy was in complete darkness and couldn't see anything, so he had to ask Leon to locate the approaching trackers. The screen showed several signals from colleagues, but strangely, the vital signs corresponding to these signals were all offline. Before Andy could figure out the reason, a purple flare suddenly exploded in the sky. By the light of the flare, Andy finally saw clearly. Not far ahead, a huge spider-like monster was staring at him. Andy immediately turned off the communication and ran away. Andy observed his surroundings cautiously, and only turned on his helmet light when he saw the spider monster hadn't followed him in. But the next second, the spider monster pounced down from the cave entrance, and its sharp limbs almost pierced through Andy's body. Andy did his best to flee backward, while the spider monster chased closely behind, constantly stabbing at him with its limbs. Just as the spider monster was about to catch up to him, Andy stepped into empty space and fell off a cliff. Fortunately, he landed on thick snow and narrowly escaped with his life. Perhaps because the cliff was too high, the spider monster didn't chase after him. It let out a strange roar and disappeared above the cliff. Andy let out a sigh of relief and understood why the ID trackers Leon had scanned had no vital signs. Those colleagues were probably all eaten by the spider monsters. He immediately restored communication, only to hear Now's desperate cries. It turned out she had claustrophobia. Although Andy didn't want to further upset her, he still told Now about the existence of the spider monsters. Instead, Now told Andy to check his spacesuit. It turned out that during the chase just now, Andy's spacesuit had been torn, and oxygen was leaking rapidly. Andy quickly took out sealant to plug the gap, but the oxygen level was already down to 12%, even at the lowest consumption rate. He couldn't reach Now's location. Just as the two were at a loss, a familiar voice suddenly came over the communication channel. It was Dwayne, who had been missing for a long time. He told Andy that he was still alive but trapped by spider monsters, and begged Andy to save him. But before Andy could respond, Dwayne's communication suddenly cut off, leaving only the hissing sound of static. Andy was already afraid of those terrifying spider monsters, and now he was even more reluctant to go save Dwayne. What's more, his display had been damaged during the chase, and now he could barely tell directions, but Now firmly opposed this. Only by helping each other could the three of them survive. She emphasized that Dwayne was only 500 meters away from Andy and had 61% oxygen left. As long as he saved Dwayne, Andy could replenish his oxygen immediately. After hearing this, Andy made up his mind. Waiting for death was the same as dying, so he might as well take a chance. He ran toward Dwayne's direction. Not long after, a purple flare suddenly rose into the sky. Immediately after, he saw Dwayne's figure. It was obvious that Dwayne had also fired that flare just now. Andy didn't have time to think further and quickened his pace to rush toward him.
Dwayne, come again! I'm here! What's the plan?
Andy, I know how to beat you!
Hiding behind the escape pod, Andy peeked out and found that Dwayne had already been killed. To his greater despair, several other equally huge spider monsters had appeared around him. When Now learned of the situation, she was extremely anxious, but soon came up with a plan. As the ship's communication supervisor, Now had the authority to control the equipment of all escape pods. She activated the distress alarm of one escape pod. The spider monsters were instantly attracted by the light and sound. Swarming toward that escape pod, they tore it apart in just a few moments. Watching this scene, Andy's tense mood eased a little, but one spider monster was still wandering near him. Now tried to repeat the trick, but accidentally activated the distress alarm of the escape pod where Andy was hiding. Andy's last glimmer of hope was shattered. Now hurriedly tried to fix the mistake, and in the end, she activated the distress alarms of all nearby escape pods.
Incoming comms request. Incoming comms request.
Taking advantage of the spider monster's confusion, Andy pushed open the door and rushed out. He didn't dare to look back and ran as fast as he could. By the time the spider monsters realized they'd been tricked and tried to chase him, Andy had already run a long way. But the spider monsters moved extremely fast and soon caught up to their prey. Strangely, just as they were about to catch Andy, they suddenly stopped in their tracks, growled at the pile of rocks and soil behind him, and even stepped back. It was as if they were afraid of something. After hesitating for a moment, the spider monsters actually turned around and left. Andy immediately told Now about the monsters' characteristics. They hunt in groups, eat people with a second mouth, move extremely fast, and have very strong attack power, able to tear apart escape pods with ease. Andy told Now to leave the escape pod immediately, but Now didn't reply. She only panted heavily. It was clear that Andy's words had triggered her claustrophobia. Andy quickly sang to comfort her, and only then did Now calm down. Andy then got up and headed toward the escape pod where Now was. Now reminded him that he only had 8% oxygen left, and suggested diverting to the mining ship to replenish it, but Andy didn't want to turn back. He decided to find Now first, no matter what. However, the further he went, the more strange the surrounding environment felt. There were countless weird mounds beside him, and a thick layer of fog hung around his feet. Just then, a group of alien creatures similar to fireflies appeared. Their bodies flickered with purple light spots, adding a touch of poetry to the cold night. Andy was fascinated by the sight. One of the insects noticed him and flew over slowly. Andy thought the insect was also interested in him, but the next second, its purple body suddenly turned into a harsh red. It fiercely stung Andy's mask, and the bodies of the surrounding insects also turned red quickly, launching a joint attack on him. Fortunately, Andy's spacesuit was strong enough, and he barely escaped unharmed. But his good luck didn't last long. Another strange sound came from the darkness. Andy moved forward cautiously, observing the situation around him. The monster was actually lurking underground. It opened its big mouth, bit Andy, bound him with mucus and silk, and swallowed him whole. Only then did Andy realize that this area was the territory of a sandworm-like monster, and the fog was its way of hiding its tracks. No wonder the spider monsters didn't dare to approach here. Andy's vital signs dropped sharply. He quickly came up with an idea, and told Leon to use the defibrillator inside the spacesuit to shock him. However, the sandworm would never give up its prey easily. It twisted its massive body and lunged at Andy. Andy turned and ran, too panicked to choose his path. When he saw a hole ahead, he crawled into it without hesitation. This place turned out to be the insect's nest.
Not again. No. I'm not doing that again.
The insects launched a fierce attack on Andy. Andy struggled frantically and crawled hard toward the cave exit. Fortunately, the exit was not far away. After escaping, he quickly slapped the insects off his body. Leon's voice sounded again. Andy's oxygen level had dropped to a dangerous level, and it suggested heading to the mining ship 0.3 kilometers away to replenish oxygen. But Andy insisted on going to Now's escape pod 0.7 kilometers away. He ran all the way and finally reached the destination just as he was about to suffocate. Now quickly opened the hatch and supplied oxygen to Andy, and only then did he recover. He then pulled out Now's trapped leg. After checking, he found it was not seriously injured. Andy handed the signal gun in the pod to Now and took the sealant himself. Then the two supported each other and climbed out of the escape pod. Andy tied a crowbar to Now's leg to assist her movement, but it still didn't work well. Now asked the AI to inject her with painkillers, and only then did she regain the ability to move. The two were just about to head for the mining ship wreckage when, the next second, spider monsters jumped out from the nearby hillside. The two didn't have time to think and ran toward the mining ship, with the spider monsters chasing closely behind. Fortunately, the mining ship was not far away. After a thrilling chase, the two reached the vicinity of the ship. They used the surrounding obstacles to dodge and avoided most of the spider monsters, but they still accidentally tripped over an oxygen tube. In the critical moment, Now fired a purple flare, and the spider monsters were instantly attracted to it. The two took the opportunity to continue running and hid in the mining ship. Now hurried to operate the control panel to close the door. She finally entered the password just before the spider monsters pounced. The door closed immediately, cutting the pouncing spider monster in half. Now panted heavily, while Andy flipped off the spider monster's corpse to vent his frustration. After regaining their composure, the two headed inside the mining ship. As the communication supervisor, Now was very familiar with the ship's interior, so she led Andy to the cargo hold. There was not only a large amount of food here, but also a stable atmosphere supply. In other words, Dwayne's plan was feasible. Now and Andy could live in the cargo hold until people from the headquarters came to pick them up. But before the two could be happy, Now saw a long trail of blood on the ground, obviously left when a corpse was dragged. The two walked into the hall cautiously, and the sight in front of them made them even more frightened. It was covered with thick spider webs. Obviously, the spider monsters had made this place their nest. Just then, a spider monster walked over slowly, and a pile of human corpses spit out from its abdomen. Andy and Now suppressed their fear and tried not to make a sound. After the spider monster left, they quietly continued moving forward. Another rustling sound came from the ceiling, and a larger spider monster twisted down. It pounced on the pile of human corpses and feasted on them. It seemed that the survival logic of the spider monster group was that males find food to feed females so that they can reproduce. Andy and Now slowly stepped back, trying to escape, but accidentally kicked the iron can behind them. The spider monster turned its head instantly and locked onto their position. The two turned and ran. In a panic, they rushed into the airlock and closed the door behind them. Andy thought they were safe, but Now said the airlock's locking mechanism was on the outside. Once the door was closed, they couldn't get out without help from someone outside. Now sat down in despair, and Andy also gave up struggling. Their final fate would be starvation. But the spider monster outside didn't want to give up its prey easily. It kept hitting the door, trying to break in. There was nothing they could do but listen to the sound of the spider monster smashing the door and wait for death to come. But just as they hugged to say goodbye, Now saw a massive purple substance behind Andy. At this very moment, the spider monster broke through the door, and Now grabbed the purple substance and threw it at the monster. The purple insects instantly turned red and kept biting the spider monster. Now and Andy took the opportunity to escape and reached another door. Andy tried to repeat the trick of crushing the spider monster with the door, but the control system was damaged. By this time, the spider monster had shaken off the insects, and was rushing toward them at high speed. Now pulled Andy and jumped down to the lower level of the ecological cabin. Fortunately, the spacesuits were strong enough, so neither of them was injured. However, the spider monster also followed and launched another attack on them. In the critical moment, Andy grabbed a can of super glue from the nearby toolbox, and smashed it hard on the spider monster's head. The glue instantly covered the spider monster's huge head, and the two took the opportunity to escape again. but the spider monster quickly shook off all the glue and pounced at them. It fell from above, scattered the two of them, and then chased closely behind now turned the situation to her advantage. She told Andy to find a way to kill the spider monster, while she ran all the way to attract its attention. After thinking for a moment, Andy asked Leon to help find a usable escape pod, then climbed into the lighting control room, and turned off all the lights in the cabin. The cabin was instantly plunged into darkness. Now took the opportunity to roll under a metal shelf and held her breath. Without light, the spider monster lost its target and could only fumble aimlessly in place. Andy climbed into the usable escape pod. While restarting the system, he told now his plan. Andy planned to crush the spider monster with the escape pod, which required now to lure the monster under the pod. Upon hearing this, now didn't hesitate. She hung a few lights on herself, and ran toward the area directly under the escape pod. The spider monster chased closely behind. Andy seized the opportunity to start the escape pod, and crashed into the spider monster at top speed. Andy's plan was successfully executed, but he also passed out. Now hurried to pull Andy out of the escape pod and kept calling his name. Fortunately, Andy was unharmed and slowly woke up. It was at this moment that the morning sun broke through the darkness. The two walked to the glass window and admired the beautiful scenery. Andy told now that according to Dwayne, the rescue team would take at least 2 years to reach this planet, but now wasn't desperate. Instead, she held Andy's hand tightly. Although there were still monsters lurking outside, as long as they were together, they would have no regrets even in the face of death. The movie ends here. As a low-budget sci-fi movie, Distant has quite good special effects. It takes a space mining disaster as the starting point, condensing the survival dilemma and human game on an unknown planet. The director abandoned the grand narrative and instead focused on Andy, the rookie miner. When the mining ship crashes on a dangerous planet, with oxygen running out, monsters lurking around, and rescue prospects dim, the threefold despair engulfs the characters like a tide. However, the director didn't indulge in the cruelty of the disaster. Instead, he dug out the faint light of human nature in the desperate situation. Andy chose to take the risk. Even though he knew rescuing now would consume 30% of his oxygen, now didn't give up looking for a way out even when her claustrophobia flared up. This choice of living toward death breaks the rigid portrayal of heroism in sci-fi films, making the courage of ordinary people more inspiring. From the scene where Andy and now hold hands tightly in the morning light and decide to face the future together, it is not difficult to see the director's deep intention. In the vast universe, only by supporting each other can we fight against loneliness and despair. Today's commentary ends here. Thank you all for watching. For those who like it, please subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you next time.